I'm in Cavendish to tell you about the case of Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage was a railroad foreman working in Vermont and had experience using explosives. But one day in 1848, while working here in Cavendish, Gage was struck by a rod that had ignited explosive powder. The rod entered Gage's lower jaw, passed behind his eye, through his brain, and exited his skull. But after a few minutes of being unconscious, Gage survived. Gage would be able to walk and talk soon after the accident. Only a few years later, he was more anxious, irritable, profane, and his colleagues called it no longer Gage. Phineas Gage would die in 1860 at the age of 36 due to a seizure, and is memorialized here in Cavendish. So next time you get a head injury, just think it could be a lot worse. I'm here in Killington, known for its wonderful ski resort full of rich out-of-staters. Killington is the heart of Vermont, but not too long ago, the heart of Vermont could have been owned by New Hampshire. In 2004 and 2005, Killington residents voted to leave Vermont and join the state of New Hampshire, primarily because an unbalanced ratio between taxes paid to the state and the amount gotten back to fund their schools, as well as restricted development due to environmental law. Opponents of the proposal stated that joining New Hampshire would not solve their problems, citing New Hampshire tax not benefiting the town and Vermont's superior equity-based education funding. The New Hampshire government passed a law in 2005 authorizing a commission to negotiate the secession of the town from Vermont to New Hampshire, and Vermont was not interested. So Killington, whether you like it or not, you're stuck with us. Ira Allen is known for a lot of things, helping found the Republic of Vermont, establishing the University of Vermont, designing the state seal, and being the state's first treasurer, among many other things. But Ira Allen participated in an event that's not very well known. Ira had the idea of forming a new nation, a union between what was at the time Canada and Vermont, known as United Columbia. He would sail to France to seek assistance in establishing the independence of this country, buying 20,000 muskets and 24 cannons, but would be captured at sea, taken to England to be put on trial, and accused of arming Irish rebels. The lawsuit would last close to a decade, and eventually, Ira was acquitted and sent back to the United States, where he would end up in Philadelphia, and where he would die. Ira Allen is honored all across the state of Vermont, especially here on campus, but many do not know or remember how really dumb ideas left him so far away from a place he called home. The Civil War rocked the country, with battles along the lines of the North and South, killing hundreds of thousands from all corners of the country in the name of ending slavery. The majority of action took place in places like Pennsylvania, Virginia, Tennessee, and Maryland. But the northernmost action took place right here in St. Albans. The Confederates wanted to establish a treasury by raiding towns and taking their money. 22 Confederates traveled through Canada and down to St. Albans, where they would take the whole town hostage, rob 3 banks, and force some residents to swear allegiance to the Confederate States of America. The raiders would escape back to Canada, seizing the equivalent of $1.7 million in today's money, but the whole event would turn many Canadians more strongly against the Confederates. In closing, the loser racist chump traders from the South tried to raise money, and while they were successful here in St. Albans, they lost the war. Sucks to suck. Vermont's flag sucks. It's not a fact, it's my personal opinion, but I think it sucks and it could be better. Anywho, Vermont has a unique flag history. The flag of the Green Mountain Boys is often claimed to be the first flag of Vermont, but the claim is a little messy. 1, there are no actual records of it being the flag of Vermont. And 2, very few records of it actually being the flag of the Green Mountain Boys. The first ever official flag of Vermont came in 1804, when Ohio and Tennessee joined the Union, and it was assumed that the national flag would reflect that. The legislature adopted a flag with 17 stars and 17 stripes, with Vermont on the top stripe. But the assumption was wrong, and 13 stripes remained on the national flag. The flag changed to reflect that 13-stripe design in 1837, but in the blue section, the seal of the state was used inside of a star, with either 8 points or 5 points, depending on the flag. Unfortunately, people did not know about the flag, and if they did, they were confused as to why it looked almost like the US flag. So, in 1923, the flag of the governor was changed to the state flag, and it has remained the flag ever since. The flag evokes flags used by Vermont units during the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, and World War I. I still think it could use a freshen up, but hey, that's just me. I'm in the state's capital, Montpelier, and many important things happened in the Vermont legislature. The legislature was the first to abolish slavery, as well as admit same-sex unions, and the first state to ban billboards. Another thing this building is known for is a 100-year-old tradition known as Farmers' Night. Long ago, in an attempt to entertain themselves, legislators from around the state would gather on Wednesday nights during the legislative session and would drink, sing songs, and perform shows. The group of legislators who did this were mostly farmers, so they would form the Farmers Club, and every Wednesday they would put together a party to cure their boredom. The tradition has changed since its inception, and it's become a free concert series, where performers from around Vermont sing, dance, tell stories, play music, and many other things, right in the House chamber. Happy Halloween from Rutland, home of the famed Halloween Parade. The parade is the brainchild of Tom Fagan, comic book fan and Rutland resident. In 1959, Fagan began the annual tradition of hosting a parade in the streets of Rutland, and it would only grow. Fagan also had connections within the comic book industry, and often brought comic book writers, characters, and celebrities to the parade. This would eventually lead to comic books being set in Rutland at the parade, where Tom Fagan would be a character called Mr. Halloween. In 2018, Tom Fagan unfortunately passed away, but his legacy still lives on. The Rutland Halloween Parade still attracts around 10,000 people annually, and in 2023, the city of Rutland unveiled this monument depicting Mr. Halloween meeting Batman. Smuggler's Notch is a passage between Mount Mansfield and Spruce Peak, and I'm here today. Smuggler's Notch derives its name from the act of smuggling, where in the 19th century, people would smuggle goods from Canada into the US, and would also be used as a way for fugitive slaves to escape into Canada. In 1922, a road was added, and more smuggling would happen, this time alcohol during the time of Prohibition. Nowadays, it is used as a scenic route, and millions pass through, but one group is not allowed on the road: trucks. 18-wheelers are strictly prohibited from driving through Smuggler's Notch, and for good reason. The winds and bends in the road would cause a backup after trucks get stuck, but this doesn't stop drivers from passing through. Recently, barriers have been installed, but only days after the barriers were put up, trucks rammed straight through. Truck drivers, please know that this will not save you time, it'll just end up making you look like an idiot. When you think of the gold rush, you think of prospectors moving out to California, Arizona, or Alaska. But you don't think of Vermont. You should. In 1826, gold was discovered in the towns of Newfane and Somerset. And eventually, in 1851, gold was discovered again in Buffalo Brook in Plymouth, starting the Vermont Gold Rush. Multiple prospectors and companies would set up operations, including mines, panning operations, rock crushers, and mills, all for finding gold. The rush lasted as long as the rush out west, with prospectors panning for gold until 1919. To this day, people fan for gold in Buffalo Brook, so if you want to stake your claim, come down, you might get lucky. We're doing Vermont Facts with Max Abroad today, because I'm standing in the extremely disappointing state of New Hampshire, looking across the Connecticut River onto the beautiful state of Vermont. The Connecticut River defines the border between New Hampshire and Vermont, and back in the 18th century, New Hampshire and New York met here, or at least New York thought so. New Hampshire and New York both laid claim to Vermont, and this dispute would eventually lead to the creation of the Vermont Republic. When Vermont was admitted to the Union, they laid claim to territory east of the Connecticut River in New Hampshire, but they had to give it up to become a state. But disputes on where the border really were fought over for centuries after the formation of the state. In 1933, in Vermont v. New Hampshire, the Supreme Court ruled that the border between the states was neither the thread of the channel of the Connecticut River nor the top of the west bank of the river, but rather the west bank of the river at the mean low mark, meaning New Hampshire gets more of the river. The greedy New Hampshirites will not share the river, and for that, the state of Vermont will never forgive them. I'm in my kitchen today, wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. Today, I'm trying out a Vermont tradition, apple pie with cheddar cheese. Apple pie with cheese has been served in the US since the early 1800s, but the practice originated in England in the 17th century. Today, while it is common elsewhere in the country, Vermont is known for enjoying this combination of foods. I've been told by local Vermonters that the best way to eat it is with cold cheddar cheese. So, today, I'll be trying it for the first time and giving my honest reaction. I get it. No, this is good. This is really good. It's unofficially wintertime, and you know what that means. Ski and snowboard season. Back in the day, the sport of snowboarding was known as snurfing, and in 1977, a young Jake Burton would watch competitions in Michigan and would be inspired to create his own company here in Vermont, known as Burton Snowboards. The sport would grow and grow, but skiers would feud with snowboarders, often going to the extent of banning snowboards from the slopes due to it being dangerous or preserving the mountain's character. Snowboard discrimination was rampant, and in 1985, only 7% of mountains allowed snowboards. Nowadays, snowboarding is much more accepted, with 97% of slopes allowing snowboards. But some discrimination still exists here in Vermont. Most notably, Mad River Glen still does not allow snowboarders, so the battle for access to the slopes still exists between the elitist skiers and the heroic snowboarders. I'm on the shores of Lake Champlain, looking out onto the mediocre state of New York. Lake Champlain has played an important role in Vermont's history, one of the top 10 largest freshwater lakes in the United States and being a vital part of the state's economy, wildlife, and broader ecosystem. In 1989, for less than 3 weeks, Lake Champlain was legally a Great Lake. The bill in Congress was designed to give institutions funding if their state was bordered by a Great Lake or the ocean. And so, thanks to Senator Patrick Leahy, Lake Champlain was legally designated a Great Lake. This would upset representatives from the Midwest, and so within a month, the lake's designation would revert back to just being a regular lake. But thankfully, the funding remained. Thank God for Patrick Leahy. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be the dead of winter, with temperatures probably in single digits and snow probably a foot high. Hopefully, unless climate change has screwed us over, but who knows? Anyway, the town of Winooski had a plan to save on energy and heating costs by covering the entire town with a large dome. In 1979, the Winooski Dome project was formulated by city council members after they drank a few glasses of wine, but it developed into a real proposal that was very popular with residents. The dome was designed to be environmentally friendly, having a small carbon footprint, something I think is very impressive. Over time, practical thinking would prevail, including how it would be paid for and what would happen if it went wrong. So the idea was scrapped. The Winooski Dome project was something to look back on fondly and admire, demonstrating environmental, out-of-the-box thinking that would dramatically change the skyline of the area. Middlebury College is known for prestigious education, beautiful scenery, and stealing UVM's mascot. The Panthers technically came before the Catamounts, but we deserve it. The Middlebury Panthers own the Middlebury Snow Bowl, a ski area owned and operated by Middlebury College. The area opened in 1934 and has 17 trails and 3 lifts. In 2006, it became the first ski area to be carbon neutral. And while it's not the biggest resort in the state, it has its own charms and traditions. Students who graduate in the middle of the year, known as FEBs, process down the slopes with their caps, gowns, and skis on. Have you ever been to a historic site in Vermont and seen one of these signs? I have in our episode on the Vermont Gold Rush. These signs, officially called Roadside Historic Site Markers, are littered across the state, with over 310 of them standing in places the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation has determined are important to Vermont's history. These aluminum signs commemorate a variety of important historical sites, like where Burton snowboards were first made, Finnish immigrants in Vermont, Norwich University, the St. Albans Raid, Boyro Bridge, and here, Mount Killington. The Vermont State website has a forum where you can suggest a place that should be commemorated. So if you have a historical site near you, send it in and get it known statewide. Over in New York State, Joseph Smith supposedly was visited by an angel who bestowed upon him golden plates describing the life of Jesus in America. Joseph Smith was a Vermonter originally. He was born right here between Sharon and South Royalton. The Mormon prophet would live here for 11 years, and 100 years after his birth, the leaders of the Church of Latter-day Saints constructed an obelisk in his honor. According to the LDS website, a dozen early Mormon leaders were from Vermont, including Brigham Young, the successor of Joseph Smith and known for the university of the same name. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm celebrating Valentine's Day on a kissing bridge. A kissing bridge is an old name for a covered bridge here in Vermont. Back in the day, when horses were still the dominant form of transportation in the state, people would drive their buggies halfway across the bridge and give their partner a kiss. Vermont has the highest density of covered bridges out of anywhere in the country, so you have plenty of chances to keep up this tradition this Valentine's Day. Robert Frost is known for his beautiful words about rural New England, but the poet has a strong connection to Vermont. For 4 decades, Frost would teach at Middlebury College at the Bread and Loaf School of English here in Ripton, and would live on and off at a house not far from where I am. Robert Frost, in 1961, was given the honor of Poet Laureate of the state of Vermont for his contributions to the state and to write about Vermont. I'm at the Robert Frost Interpretive Trail, a national recreation trail run by the U.S. Forest Service. And for the rest of this episode, I will be reading Frost's famous poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, a poem about a wintry New England road in the woods, I imagine much like these. woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here. Watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. When this is released, there will be 1 week until Town Meeting Day in Vermont. Town Meeting Day is Vermont's unique form of direct democracy and is a proud part of political life here in the state. Town Meeting Day first started in 1762 in Bennington and has been a tradition ever since, allowing for residents to directly contribute to their town's government. This Town Meeting Day, I encourage anyone who can to participate. Some towns do traditional voting in voting booths, some have open floor town meetings, and some do both. Registering to vote can be done the day of if you aren't already registered, and more information can be found on the Secretary of State's website. Get out and direct democracy. Vermont was, for 14 years, its own country. But what if it happened again? I'm here in Charlotte, where in 2003, Professor Thomas Naylor released the Vermont Manifesto, an advocation for the creation of the Second Vermont Republic. Naylor stated that the United States had lost its way, stating that it was no longer sustainable economically, politically, socially, militarily, or environmentally. This movement gained some minor but notable traction. The Bread and Puppet Theater joined Naylor and other advocates in marching on Montpelier, and 300 attendees called on Vermont independence. Conventions were held, including some inside the Vermont State House. Candidates for governor openly favored secession. The movement was not without its criticism, as it had some connections with neo-Confederate groups, which led to public outcry, including from the Southern Poverty Law Center. While the group tried to distance themselves from these hateful groups, the movement never gained back what little traction it had. Whenever I have guests coming into town, I bring them to the world's tallest filing cabinet. Reactions have varied. What I've found is that almost nobody really knows what it is and why it's here. The world's tallest filing cabinet is known worldwide, though it is not the world's tallest, nor is it its official name. The sculpture is called File Under SoCo Waiting For, and it represents the delay of the Sunland Connector, an extension of I-189 to downtown Burlington. From my own experience, it has not produced the kind of reaction I assumed the artist was looking for. Instead, the sculpture gets a good laugh. Vermont has a pretty rich history with baseball, including its own baseball league. In 1907, a minor league called the New Hampshire State League formed, but early in the season, every New Hampshire team folded. The Vermont teams gathered, restructured, and created the Vermont State League. There are a few teams: the Barry-Montpelier Intercities, the Plattsburgh Brewers, the Rutland Sheiks, and the Burlington Burlingtons, who played here at Centennial Field. During its inaugural season, the Barry-Montpelier Intercities won the league title, but the league lasted a month, from July 2nd, 1907 to July 28th, 1907. After disbanding, the teams would scatter to other leagues, and baseball in Vermont, in one way or another, would survive, where today, the Vermont Lake Monsters still play where the Burlington Burlingtons used to play over 100 years ago. The Northeast Kingdom, the Kingdom, NEK. I'm in St. Johnsbury to talk a little bit about the region, specifically its name. This region, in the northeast of the state, is one of the least densely populated areas in the whole of New England. This rural region has a very interesting reason for its name. One would assume the Northeast Kingdom is ancient, maybe from the 1700s, but not really. It came from the year 1949. Governor and Senator George Aiken coined the term in a speech, and the name grew and grew, to the surprise of Aiken himself. I think the name is appropriate, since the majesty of the area is very appropriate for the name Kingdom. Rocks. They're everywhere, but these rocks are special. I'm in Barrie at Rock of Ages to tell you about Barrie granite. Barrie granite is a type of granite only found in the surrounding area and is sought after for its superior qualities. For this, lots of things around the world use Barrie granite. Every statue here in Barrie uses it, as well as many headstones at the nearby Hope Cemetery. The Vermont State House uses a lot of it, and a new addition to the 9/11 Memorial uses it in New York City. This rock has given Barrie the nickname the Granite Capital of the World, a nickname well-deserved. I've done almost 30 episodes about places in Vermont, but none about places outside of Vermont. There are plenty of places outside of Vermont that still have connection to our state. During the long western expansion of the United States, Many settlers, including Vermonters, would name their towns after where they were from. For example, there's a Vermont, Indiana, a Vermont, Illinois, and a Vermont, Wisconsin, all named after the state. We can go even further. There's a Montpelier, Ohio, and a Montpelier, Indiana, both named after the capital. There's even a Montpelier, Idaho, named after Brigham Young, a Vermont native. There's a Cavendish, Ohio, a Winooski, Wisconsin, a Barre, Wisconsin, and a Vergennes, Illinois, all named after places in our state. Finally, there is a Vermont, Australia. However, it just seems to be a coincidence, named after the Green Hills, just like our Vermont. We're beginning to thaw here in Vermont, which takes me back to a certain legend. In 1887, the Montpelier Argus and Patriot ran a story. A Vermont family was trying to save on food and heat during the winter, so they would drug their oldest family members and let them freeze out in the cold in the winter. In May, their frozen bodies would be uncovered and thawed, ready for the spring. This frightening story was a hoax, but many believed it. The tale resurfaced in the 1930s, and stories about it ran in major newspapers like the Boston Globe. So as we move into spring, remember to thaw out your grandparents. There are 247 municipalities in the state of Vermont, and all 247 of them almost cover all the land in the state. Keyword there, almost. I'm in Buell's Gore today, which is legally not part of any town. Gores are pieces of land that aren't claimed by any town government, and are leftovers from when the towns first laid their claims. In the state of Vermont, there are 4 gores, and these gores are very sparsely populated. In Buell's, there are only 29 people, a drop from 30 people in 2010. There isn't much to these land surveying accidents, except for one cool thing that I found. Buell's Gore is named after Major Elias Buell, who settled in Vermont in the 1780s and helped found the new state. When they named Buell's Gore, the major didn't want his name attached to it, instead wanting to call it something way more rad and cool, Montsor. This is it. This is the last episode of Vermont Facts with Max. We've been far and wide, from the shores of Lake Champlain to the banks of the Connecticut River. We've been high in Buell's Gore and low in the Gold Line streams. This series has made me appreciate Vermont even more. Every scene looks like a postcard, every town welcoming, and every trip worth taking. For that, I say thank you. Thank you to the friends who have served as my crew on these trips. Thank you for the audiences for enjoying and liking the series. And thank you to Vermont for being rich in history and full of natural beauty. This has been Vermont Facts with me, Max.